If you've played video games, you've probably heard "Git Good." It may make you cringe, laugh, cry, get excited. Who knows what your opinions are on "Git Good." It can be an insult, or a kind of a cult-like chant depending on the games you play. Is this a culture, personality trait, or just a generic personality? And is there an opposite to the "Git Good" culture? I think there's definitely a different option, maybe not opposite, though I would argue trolls are probably the closest thing you're going to get to opposite of "Git Good," but we're not going to go into the trolling aspect. We are going to talk about "Git Good" and people who maybe play video games but don't necessarily abide by that whole notion. I have no hard feelings either way. I've definitely said this to my friends as a joke, but I really don't say it online to other people or in comments, as I don't find it productive unless you know the person well and you can both laugh about it. As I said before, more generally an insult rather than a words of encouragement. So what is the other path? I'm going to call it roleplay / hero path. I am going to try to tie this into Darkest Dungeon specifically, but this can work in Dark Souls and other games as well, as these mindsets are for video games and not born from specific games. This portion of the population, we'll get into it a little deeper, tends to play games how they like them, despite maybe going against the most meta comps or using the best and most efficient strategies that have probably been created by Type A personalities, which we'll get into. Before we continue though, I'm going to make a statement that hopefully we can all agree upon, but we can see how people arrive here differently. If we can agree that fun, entertainment, fulfillment is the main purpose of why we play a game, we're going to be able to have a good grounds here. This will also allow us to see maybe how each party gets there in their enjoyment and fulfillment, and maybe why occasionally heads may be butted. First, we're going to look at the "Git Good" culture. The best way to do this is interview thousands of people who live the "Git Good" culture and aren't afraid to say it to your face and explain how they've got there and maybe describe their personality. That would A, take way too long, and B, they would have to admit that they're part of that group, and they would also have to admit that they're Type A personality. There's a lot of flaws in that, so we're going to go based off of observations of what I can use from psychology and maybe put that into video games itself. History is very important, so we're going to talk about the history of the "Git Good" culture. I did a little bit of research on the internet, not too terribly much, but my hunch was correct. Apparently 2008 to 2009, Metal Gear Solid had a video game that kind of started it, but in 2011 to 2012 it really took off when Dark Souls and a Call of Duty game came out. Obviously in Call of Duty, "Git Good" was an online insult, and then Dark Souls, "Git Good" was probably an insult to other people as you met them or talked in online forums. So the curious thing is, as I just said, we had a multiplayer use the "Git Good" culture, but we also had a single player game use the "Git Good" culture. Therefore, this would suggest it's not just a strictly competitive person against person thing. We are much closer to maybe a personality trait or a personality than we are a type of video game. Comparing the player basis, we have something that's now more competitive and something that is traditionally harder and people seek to become better at. It is possible people who would use this statement could be linked back to a very competitive personality trait, or possibly just a generic Type A personality. If you're not familiar, there are personality types and quizzes you can take. The one tree of general personality theory is Type A, Type B, Type D, and Type T now. For the sake of the video, D and T do not apply, so we're not going to talk about them. You can be different levels, I would like to argue, in Type A and Type B. You're not just a Type A, therefore you have to feel or have to react as hard as this since you're Type A. Like most things in life, there are a spectrum. You could be very severe Type A, or you could be a little more Type A and you're probably not Type B, but you don't have a hard time necessarily transitioning to some of those Type B traits as much as a severe Type A person would. Now that's out of the way, what the heck is a Type A personality? Type A tends to be perfectionist, efficient, detail-oriented, and most importantly to video games, competitive. These are all traits that are greatly rewarded in competitive games or a game with high skill ceilings. Thus, it could be theorized if you're Type A, or possibly a highly competitive person, which is often found in Type A, you find yourself gravitating towards the idea of "Git Good" culture, or using things more as numbers rather than role-playing, our other playable option. Type A's may find themselves self-planning out the whole game and sitting down and calculating what exactly the damage boosts are and who are going to be the best characters in the game. In contrast to our role player, or simple enjoyment, these factors may not be as big of a deal, since they do not directly reflect to the amusement and fulfillment of the game for a Type B, but they probably do for a Type A. Type A wants to complete the game as efficiently as possible, and like I said, we'll eventually get to Type B. Before I continue, it is obviously possible to have traits of both, as we stated before. Typically this variety decides whether you're strictly A or B. People can be competitive, then there are people who are really competitive. And I'm sure by me saying that you're laughing to yourself. That is, if you're not a Type A. You could end up laughing to yourself if you are Type A, because you're probably highly conscientious of yourself, and you know that you are competitive, and that if someone's not competing, they're not playing. So, just something funny. I find myself being on the higher competitive end. I've liked multiplayer games. I understand the Git Gud culture. I just usually try not to say it, though I will admit sometimes I do think it. Certain people do complain about certain games, and I go, well, sounds like you may not have tried hard enough at times. But once again, it may be a personality difference. Type B, or maybe the role player for these style of games. These games are far too popular to only be played by people that are Type A. But that is why we're honing in on the Git Gud culture. I have many friends who have played Dark Souls, and I would argue for the most part none of us are too far in the Type A world, or really in the Type A world at all. I myself definitely lean into Type A, as I said before, but I'm not really on the extreme. I still pick heroes simply because I like them, and I try out less ideal party comps because they sound fun. This is definitely not something a strictly Type A personality would do, unless they're trying to weed out the less efficient weapons or party compositions in terms of Darkest Dungeon. I will admit though, I don't get attached to heroes, and I do see things more as strategies and numbers rather than stories and situations that are beyond the numbers and damage. But once again, you won't see me in an Excel sheet calculating how much 20% damage is on 10 to 16, plus the 10% from the light bonus, and then possible another 5%. Nah, you won't see me doing that. I'll let the extreme Type A people pick out the hero tree and the best efficient damage, as I have it on a more moderate level where I pick maybe the more obvious strategies, and I'll let the Type A's find the most efficient strategies, as a lot of math and planning definitely goes into those. It is greatly appreciated by the community, but it's probably not something I'm really contributing towards. So how does it look if our proposed Type B player plays a Dark Souls or Darkest Dungeon game? I would imagine they are certainly more relaxed and probably have a lower toleration for bosses that are just hard for the sake of being hard. Why is that? Since Type Bs tend not to be perfectionists or try to imagine every possible damage combination, it could be they don't care enough to quote-unquote get good enough or find other ways to defeat some bosses. Once again, that is a gross overextension and can easily be incorrect. There are Type B personalities who beat these games all the time. So therefore, it's not like Type B personalities can't finish games, they just may be quicker to frustration. However, Type A's don't accept this either, as if you do meet a boss who maybe is a little more wacky and doesn't necessarily follow all the rules, it could actually drive them up a wall and cause them to severely find a lot of unenjoyment in that area. So therefore, Type A's could actually suffer in this as well because they simply care too much and are too competitive, while Type B's might be like, yeah, it's a little weird, but I'm willing to move on, while Type A's get caught up. So therefore, both personalities can get caught up on different aspects of bosses, I would assume. Once again, I haven't actually done research on this, but taking the basis of the more relaxed and less competitive will be more forgiving in certain areas, as the Type A's will not. They may actually complain about different bosses in the game, where one person goes, I never found that boss to be an issue, and the other person's like, that boss wanted me to, pull all the remains of my hair out. It's very interesting on how we come to that. Getting back to Darkest Dungeon, Type B players will probably attach themselves to classes they enjoy, despite them being suboptimal, same with their party compositions. To the Type A's, this is rather a foreign idea, as they see a video game with numbers and possible outcomes, and like I said, the best possible way to then beat that game. For a Type B personality, the numbers and best possible outcomes may not even be something they're thinking of right away, as they're stuck in the moment and more focused on the journey rather than all the numbers that lead to a perfect end. Their fun is probably derived from the stories they're telling and the parties they're using, because maybe they do have flaws and they find that more fun. A famous example from the first Darkest Dungeon between probably Type A's and Type B's, or at least severe Type A's and everyone else, is the leper. I personally think the leper can be a great hero. However, I've had probably more type A people who've done all the damage calculations on the accuracy and the actual damage they do in the road diversification of his attacks and say the leper is ultimately a useless character. I disagree with that, but once again, all the numbers and detailed efficiency would speak with him being slow and all that stuff. He's just not a great character. However, I'm not severe type A. I like characters that tend to have large weapons. So when I saw the leper and he has a huge sword, I was like, alright, you know, we're going to make this guy work regardless of how bad he is. And you know what? I did for the most part. And he can be effective, which is really good. There were classes I definitely avoided using a lot because I didn't think they were as efficient. So I still have type A tendencies, but I also do have type B tendencies, as I would pick characters that were less efficient. But once again, I wouldn't necessarily get attached or make stories for them. There are degrees to everything, and we have to ask ourselves, where is this person coming from? Are they a numbers person? Efficiency expert? Just playing a game to have a good time? Making their own story? Or is this just a troll? Sometimes people just say it because they like getting a rise out of other people, and we have to move beyond that. But in this video I didn't really talk about trolls because once again they are just there to instigate typically, and they're not necessarily even on a side, as they may not even have played the game themselves. We can all play the same game, but we can also all have such different views and stories from it. And that's the beauty of it. Some of us boast how fast we beat the game and the fact that we didn't lose anybody. And other people talk about their treasured hellion who made it through 5 death's door checks. Something Type A couldn't care any less about, and Type B remembers the name, the dungeon, the situation, and the fact they killed the boss with the final hit. Very different personalities probably remember different things and definitely derive fun from those situations. We all play video games, and as long as we find them fun or fulfillment in them, that's all that truly matters, especially in single player games. I didn't really get too deep into multiplayer as that is an expected competitive setting, and people who kind of troll or roleplay in competitive settings can be fun for a little bit, but ultimately you will run into highly competitive people who just will not stand for it for very long. But there's definitely fun videos out there of people doing that. I wanted to focus on single player and aspects of Darkest Dungeon, why some people may be a little more numbers oriented, and why some people may say, just pick a class that's fun to you. Type A's probably are going to create the numbers, paths, and strategies if you do want to beat the game, and you don't want to invest a lot of time for the Type B. And if you're a Type B player, you probably just enjoy the ride in the game, and you're not necessarily, once again, gross generalization, thinking about things too hard in terms of numbers and where you're going. All that matters is that you understand what you find fun in a video game, and you seek it out, and that game allows you to do it. So if you're a Type A, go play all the games where you can crunch damage numbers and pass all you want. If you're Type B, you can probably go really play any game and make any story out of it, which is the beauty of it. You're probably not held down by the constructs of what the game gives you. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of the Git Good culture versus the role player.